Welcome to the Radical Responsibility Revolution podcast. This is where we are transforming lives, inspiring you to reclaim your health, your wealth, and the power of your mind. Here we share actionable insights, inviting you to turn inwards and design your life of purpose and abundance. Welcome back to another episode of Radical Responsibility Revolution. Today, I want to talk about billionaires, wealth taxes, and all of these things about how people are demonizing having wealth. It's crazy. So, we're getting started right now. I want to set the table for this conversation first because this really matters. And I want to talk about it from the perspective that I wrote a book called Your Inner Billionaire. And frankly, when I named that, I had no idea that a billionaire was going to be so demonized in especially the United States at this point in history, but it is. And so I want to talk about where I come from, why I believe this way, because honestly, I know that I'm probably out there in the 1% of people that believe this way, but also about this idea of money is bad. I think we're back to money is evil kind of conversation that isn't really true in the Bible. Anyways, so for over 20 years, I've taught abundance, creation, and what it actually means to take radical responsibility for your life. That's what the channel is about. And when I say radical responsibility, I mean it. There was a period in my younger years where I didn't pay federal income taxes. Like I was in my 20s and I'm a 60s Woodstock girl. So I was like, the government is not being good stewards of my money. I didn't not understand the system. I just fundamentally did not believe that the federal government was a good steward of my money. That was the bottom line. And that was in the 70s. Look what they're doing now. So this is a deeply, deeply, deeply held principle for 50 years. It's not as if I have changed my belief that if you're taking my money, your money, you better be a good steward with it. And that applies to business, it applies to nonprofits, applies to your household, and it certainly applies to the government. So when I was seeing what they were doing back then with our money, I was like, I'm not going to file tax returns. I'm going to keep every bit of it that I can because it was before I really understood that I could just make myself an entrepreneur and manage it that way. Because when you're an employee, you have to fill out this thing called your W-4 that says, I want you to take out this much in my deductions. And then people have this really another interesting thing happen where they believe that they're getting a windfall when they get a refund from the federal government for money that the federal government has held on to interest free for a year. That in and of itself was crazy making. But I'm also firmly against every government bailout that I have ever seen, especially the big ones in 2008 and the COVID one. This is crazy making that we have been allowing that to happen. And why am I against bailouts? Well, because I believe in the free market. It has always worked unless we get in and muck it up and put our little thumbs and fingers in the pie. And if you believe in personal responsibility, everyone, including organizations and companies in the government, are really supposed to be taking responsibility for themselves. So when you remove consequence, which is what happens when you have a bailout, you don't create compassion. You create dependence. Now, I'm more than willing to have a debate with people about this bailout conversation at another time, but I wanted to be clear about my knowingness. This isn't a belief, it's a knowingness that we are all, every single one of us, from a spiritual perspective, a consciousness perspective, financial perspective, we're all 100% responsible for our lives. And if somebody wants to debate me or argue on that point, happy to do so. Now, I don't typically share political viewpoints just because it's so polarizing. And that's intentional for that reason. Because we're living in a world right now that is so polarized, so reactive, and so emotionally charged that most conversations aren't conversations anymore. Have you noticed that? They're just arguments, they're battles, it's fighting. And what I want to talk about today is not political, it's philosophical, it's fundamental, it's foundational to universal laws. That is, for me, an esoteric line in the sand. And frankly, I just can't stay quiet about it anymore because there's so much rhetoric going on out there. I had to have a conversation about it. Yes, I am one of the people who left the place that I was born and raised in. I was a native Southern Californian and I loved it. But I'm now part of what the people call the U-Haul Exodus from that place called California. But it's happening in other states: Washington, New York, New Jersey, Virginia. I mean, come on, we can go on and on. And it's all in these places where monetary policy has slowly eroded the value of staying there. Like, I'm not going back to California any day soon. And then I hear a quote from Bernie Sanders suggesting that people like me, people who leave these kind of states, don't believe in democracy. I want to say that again. He called out, now maybe he was talking to the billionaires, but I heard it because I left because of these monetary policies. He said people that are leaving for those reasons from states that have these ridiculous monetary policies don't believe in democracy. What? I was stunned, ashamed, I say, that there is a person in our legislative form of government who would say something so callous and frankly shameful that I could not hold my tongue any longer. I'm sorry, I just couldn't, because that is not only insanely inaccurate, it's absurd on its face. I've traveled the world, blessings, 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 and I have seen third world countries. I have seen countries run by cartels, by socialism, by communism, and I choose to live in the United States of America. Why? Because of the freedom that we enjoy here. And most importantly, the economic freedom, which seems to be becoming more and more eroded as every day goes by. The economic freedom to live and thrive in a place where the administration of that state does not tax its citizens to death is where I live in Texas now. Because for centuries, people have come to this country for opportunity, for the chance to create something from nothing. It's been called the American dream for centuries. Pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But now we are watching a narrative unfold that says, sure, we welcome you and we will fill your pot of gold. And for the rest of you, we may station guards around your pot of gold and decide how much of it you're allowed to keep. I'm sorry, I didn't buy into that program. That is not what the four founders wanted. That is not freedom. And I'm going to say this as clearly as I possibly can. That is not radical responsibility. That, my beautiful ones, is theft. And I share my background so you understand this philosophy of abundance. It's about circulation. And the reason that I'm setting all of that up is because what we are watching happen right now in real time is not isolated. It's not just a policy conversation. It's not just a tax proposal. It's the shift in how we think about success. There is a shift happening in how we think about ownership. Oh my gosh. There are people right now that are running for offices that believe that we should take away your personal property. What? That's crazy. That is the American dream. There's a shift in how we think about what is yours and what is up for debate. So, because I come from a spiritual perspective and a spiritual abundance perspective, it's really interesting when I see this rhetoric that we now have this renewed push for what's being called a wealth tax. Now, I'm sure that there's plenty of people out there, because I hear them, that on the surface, oh, it sounds so reasonable. It sounds so fair. It sounds so compassionate. You might even think it sounds like we're solving a problem. But that's not the truth. That is absolutely not the truth. And I've recorded several podcasts on this social program community that we are creating, which only takes everyone down from the lowest to the highest. Because what we want to do is begin to elevate our consciousness to a place that we see abundance in our life, whatever abundance looks like for you. But I want you to slow down with me for a second, because I got a little up there, and really look at what's being proposed. Because when you combine that idea, this wealth tax idea, with the belief that people who create wealth are somehow less moral or less deserving, that is the key. They are not less deserving. And they certainly, as Bernie said, they're not un American if they choose where to live because they want to keep more of their hard earned success. Because then we're not talking about economics, we're talking about ideology. And I want to take you back for a moment. This did not get big news headlines, but it came across my, probably because I have billionaire all over the place. There was a small group of people about a month or so ago in San Francisco marching. There's so many protests, so much marching going on right now. It was called a billionaire march, and that's why it grabbed my attention. I was like, oh my gosh, now they're protesting against billionaires again. But it wasn't against billionaires, it was for them. Holy cow. Now, granted, I will tell you, it wasn't well attended, but there was a gentleman that was leading it, and it struck me that it wasn't the march itself, it was the reaction to it. Oh my gosh, it was crazy. There's so much violence out there right now. It blows my mind a little bit. Because what I saw, and this is always what it is, it's not about disagreement. It's not about having a conversation. It's not about listening to each other. It's about hostility. They had signs that said, eat the rich. Okay, I thought the Donner Party ate people because they were trying to survive. These people are saying, eat the rich. Somebody's going to eat me? They had guillotines of people that represented billionaires. And this mockery of the idea that it is not okay to build wealth in the United States of America. That's what people come here for, or at least it used to be. Now they come here for the social programs. This is dehumanization, as if somehow being a wealthy person makes you unhuman. I can't even tell you what I was thinking, because we have crossed a line. We have moved from, I don't agree with you, to, you shouldn't exist the way you are. This is fundamentally spiritually on every level. I don't care what religion or spirituality you are. This is fundamentally against our human nature. And then when you combine that with this cultural energy, with policies that say, we're going to come in and take a percentage of what you have built as part of this American dream. Now, we're not having just a conversation about taxes at this point. We're having a conversation about who owns your life, who owns your effort, and ultimately, who owns your future. It should be you if you're taking radical responsibility for yourself and putting people in a government position to do that as well. So, somewhere in this giving away of money, I've heard nothing about increasing Social Security, which is what I am supposed to live on at 70 years old. And I want to be very clear This is not about tax policy that I'm talking about. This is about freedom. This is about ownership. This is about agency. And this is about whether or not you actually believe, because this is what I teach and have been for my whole life. You get to create your life, or someone else gets to decide what you're allowed to keep from your life. So if you strip this down very, very simply, this is what some of the proposals are. You earn money, you get taxed. You invest money, you get taxed. You spend money, you get taxed. And now we're saying we're going to tax you for everything that you have. These wealth taxes are going to tax your net worth, your assets, your property, your investments. That's not a second layer. That's not even a third layer. That is our ownership being questioned. In other words, we can't own anything anymore. I think that's a little ludicrous. Unless, of course, we're all going to become nomads. Maybe we'll just be like Jesus and walk around and have nothing but our staff and go through the process. But we live in this consumer society that just needs everything. So I find it fascinating that the same people that are ordering DoorDash, going to Starbucks, are the same ones protesting that other people are making too much money. I mean, come on. If you think about over time, all the things that we've added, we have cell phones, we have Wi-Fi, we have streaming, we have now paying for NFL, we have our special little apps that we need. And the thing is no wonder that people think things are unaffordable. It's because we've added so many things that really aren't necessary for our lives. But I'm going to say something that's going to make people really uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable. This whole notion that taxing the rich, somehow or another, being rich is a bad thing. That is a horrible mindset, consciousness to put out to the world. It wants to keep everybody down here on the bottom level. I'm like, no, all things rise. All of that kind of rhetoric, that, my loves, is not democracy. As a matter of fact, Bernie, you're wrong. I love democracy because what you're proposing is control. And here's the part that nobody wants to say out loud. This pitch, this whole idea that this is so appealing to take away other people's money. You're going to get more. And someone else is going to pay for it. Me, you, we're all paying for it. Because, come on, I guess people like free stuff. It always reminds me of being in high school. And when somebody runs as president of the student body and they say, I'm going to put in sugary snacks in the cafeteria, or you're going to get free days off or no homework. They can't make those promises without the consequences. Because underneath is a very dangerous shift that's happening from this American dream of I can create the most amazing life to I can take it right away from you. Those are not the same frequency, not even close. And if you listen to me at all, I talk about frequency. And when I read through this perspective, something really starts to hit me in the gut. Families didn't come to America for handouts. They do now, but that's not what we were founded on. They came here for this economic freedom, the chance to build something from nothing, to create something from nothing, to become something, their dream from nothing. They left countries where their outcomes were fixed, which is what is being proposed to happen here. They come from places where their effort didn't matter. And they came here because it did. So what are we doing now? We are slowly introducing the very thing people fled. And here's where I'm going to take this even deeper. Because I don't just teach radical responsibility for individuals. I believe in radical responsibility for systems, government, businesses, families, and especially the government. This entity that we fund has zero restraint. Can you imagine that had a family member and they were just always having their hand out asking for money? I'm pretty sure that some of you listening to this have those family members. And then you would watch them just spend it on the most ridiculous things. They would go on shopping sprees, they would take trips, and they would tell you, "Oh, I'm so destitute. I need this money." You would get tired of it. I promise you. And you would cut them off. The government is that entity. It is our partner, if you will. It has shown zero restraint, no discipline. They overspend like there's a tree made of money out in the backyard. Yeah, it's in your backyard. Inefficiency, waste. Their solution is always the same. Give us more. It's like the Artful Dodger. Please. On what point do we say, no, you don't get to mismanage my resources and then come back and demand more from the people who are doing it, who are putting the energy out there to create these dreams in their lives? Because this is the part that people are not thinking through because they're still in that victim mentality. If you tax wealth, not income, what does that even require? Scary, I'm telling you. It requires visibility into everything you own, which they started that process about 4 years ago to look at everything that you do own and how your banking goes. It's your house, your assets, your investments, your valuables. And at what point does that become inspections? I'm here to inspect what's inside your house. Surveillance. When is that going to happen? And then this ultimate control over you. Because honestly, that's not theoretical. That's the mechanism that will be required to enforce this idea, net worth wealth taxation. And if that doesn't make you pause, think about it. Go and replay this because everything that I have ever taught is built on one foundational truth. You can create what you desire. You. It's coming from you through alignment, through frequency, through your own radical responsibility. But that only works in a system where you are allowed to keep and expand what you do create. And if the underlying message is no matter what you build, we're going to take part of it. Oh, you don't have abundance then. You have limitation. You have suppression. You have a ceiling placed on your human potential, your spiritual potential. Nature doesn't operate this way. Can you imagine in an orchard? There's a tree in the orchard is now punished for producing more fruit than another tree next to it. No tree is ever forced to give its apples to another tree. They both draw from the same source. That is true abundance. That is nature. They draw from these sources, the sun, the soil, the water, and they produce based on its capacity, which is who we are is nature. And so even take this further. Imagine walking into the orchard and saying, you've grown too much. We're going to take from you and redistribute it to the other trees. Okay, it doesn't work that way. The other trees can't do anything with it. You aren't creating balance then. You aren't redistributing wealth. You certainly do not create balance. As a matter of fact, you disrupt the entire ecosystem. So I want to talk practically for a second. If your success becomes penalized, what happens to innovation? What happens to risk taking? What happens to the person who says, I'm going to build something bigger than myself? They leave. And we are seeing it all day, every day with this U-Haul exodus. These states are losing billions from the tax revenue in income from the citizenry that leaves. Countries are abandoning these wealth taxes all over the world because they don't work. They've done it. They figured out it doesn't work because you cannot force productivity. You can only inspire it. And this is the part that matters the most to me. This isn't about billionaires. This is not about a mindset. It's a belief system. It's a frequency. And it says it's okay to take from someone else because they have more is wrong on all spiritual levels. Because once you normalize that, you don't redistribute wealth. You erode trust. You erode motivation and sovereignty and agency. And ultimately, you erode freedom. I know this with every fiber of my being. You do not need permission to build a life you're proud of. And you do not need to diminish someone else to do it, to justify your own existence. So this is why I teach what I teach. This is why your inner billionaire exists. Because the opposite of control is not chaos. It's responsibility. It's agency. And I know that this conversation is going to keep coming. This whole idea of wealth tax, whole idea of equity, whole idea of redistribution. It doesn't work. It's not how nature works. Because underneath all of it is one question. Do you believe in creation or control? It's pretty simple. Do you believe in personal power and agency or enforced outcomes? We should have none of that because those two paths lead to very different worlds. And the one we choose, we are already building. It is up to us to stand up for this financial freedom that this country was built on and stop demonizing when people are successful, whether you call it a millionaire, a billionaire, a wealth tax, or something else. This is not about being compassionate and giving to everybody else. It's about lifting up those that feel that they are less than or victims in a way that empowers them to be in this path with us. And if this struck a chord with you, share this podcast. I would love for you to subscribe and share it with others so that we can collectively say, we are creating our lives. Welcome back. Are you here?